Broke my neck. I didn't know it at the time. My hand was also broken, my right hand. But the most serious injury I had was my left tib fib was separated at the knee.
Welcome to the Calm in the Chaos podcast, where we discuss untold heroic experiences and dive into the mindset of the Navy's elite rescue swimmers. Hosted by former U.S. Navy Aviation Rescue Swimmer, Mount Everest solo summiteer, and best-selling author Brian Dickinson.
Dustin Littledale, 21 years in service as aviation rescue swimmer and so many other forms of serving in the military. I'm excited to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah. So you saw the pod was being released. You reached out to me. You sent me some details of just incredible things that you did, like in a short amount of time too. So I'm just excited for you to share that with everyone and for me to learn more about you. But just before we get started, let's just back up to, where'd you grow up? How was your childhood?
Okay. Yeah. So I it's funny. I listened to the episode that Corey was on. He talked about being a bit of a mischievous kind of a kid a little bit. I think we all can relate to that a little bit. I was born in Northern California. My folks split up when I was pretty young. So my mom moved down to Southern California and my dad stayed in the Northern California. So I kind of bounced back and forth. That already kind of makes you a little bit of a wayward kid. So
Sure.
not much of a foundation there. Was involved in a lot of sports. My dad got me really involved, not so much team sports, but into running. It's something I really enjoyed, but my dad always got for a run. And then there was something really inspiring about that. And I just decided to join him at a very young age. I think as early as like 4 or 5 years old, I started kind of jogging with him. He started putting me in 10Ks and 5Ks locally. When I got to middle school, I joined the cross country team, the track team, and did quite well there, qualifying for like state and all that good stuff in different categories. So really fell in love with those like single person type sports. You really only have to rely on yourself. But
What year was that?
This was in the early 90s when I was in competing in the cross country and track and field in Southern California.
But as like the 5Ks as a like 5-year-old.
This was
80s?
late 80s to early 90s.
That's awesome because back then it was not like now. There's a 5K for everything, right?
Yeah.
Which it's great. It gets people out and doing their thing. But yeah, back in the 80s, we didn't have much. So that's super cool that one, you had that and your dad encouraged you to do it and did it with you. So that's awesome to have a father who modeled that for you.
Yeah, that was our great connection. That and going hiking together, those types of experiences. So, moved back with my mom towards the teenage years. Kind of turbulent there. My stepdad wasn't necessarily a great guy. There was some abuse type things were going on there. So I ended up actually being removed from my home when I was about 12 years old and put in a foster home until I was 17. And then on the backside of that, I ended up renting a room from a friend of mine, his parents. Got a job working steel fabrication. And during that whole time, I knew that I wanted to join the service, much like what Corey was talking about in his podcast. It would be a little bit mischievous, not having a lot of direction. I knew that I would get that in the military. I knew it would serve me physically and all the other good things I needed. So it's quite the long, arduous task of just getting into the military. It took me about 1.5 years to join. But yeah, that's kind of how that all ended up. I kind of found my way into the Navy, but through a lot of hard work getting there.
Yeah, but you made it.
Yeah. I dropped out of high school. So getting into the military, the GED is pretty tough. So it took me about 1 year going down to MEPS. At the end of every month, I was waiting for a spot to open. It's all these quota things. So after about 1 year, I finally got in 6 months of delayed entry program. Back in those days when you got those, is probably something similar you experienced. There was no screening test or anything like that. They gave you the contract. I got to pick the rate I wanted right away. The reason I picked AO was the job sheet said as an air crew rescue swimmer and an AO that I would serve as the aviation gunsmith and aerial door gunner. And I like it. Hey, all that sounded fantastic to me.
Sounds awesome.
I read through some of the other source rates, AW and airframe. None of those kind of things really spoke to me quite a bit. And to be honest, I didn't really understand how the Navy worked. I thought it was an awful lot like the Coast Guard ASTs were. So in my mind, like how ASTs, they're working ALSS gear, then they're doing their aircraft job. I didn't realize the whole job of being a crew chief
Hmm.
any of that. I thought I'd be working in the armory, and then when I wasn't there, I'd be flying. So when I went to boot camp, I had to take a screening test. You had a finite amount of time to pass that. I passed that the first time up, and that's what cemented my contract going down to Pensacola for aircrew school and rescue swimmer school. And then by that time, all the A schools had moved down from Tennessee down to Pensacola. So it was
Okay.
co-located right there. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that was the route I took. That was in January of 1999. I shipped off for boot camp and then came to Pensacola. Hit each school up. I think I checked on like a Sunday, or rather like a Friday or Saturday night, way in the middle of the night. I got a list of stuff to really exchange and buy. Some folks in the barracks kind of helped me out. And what do you need? Get ready. And like that Monday, man, I was in aircrew school, and it's the 4 weeks aircrew school at that time. I graduated on a Friday. That next Monday, I was put your fins on, you're right in class. Uh,
Hmm.
it's not quite like that. I guess everybody's story is not quite like that. That's how I remember it. There was no lax or no laps anywhere in training. It was
No, I was the same. I started so far behind people that I ended up passing through like FRS, going directly into SEER, and it's just not taking vacation, or sometimes it's just luck of the draw. You show up, and sometimes, maybe in your case, you almost hope you have some time to like chill and get acclimated, but sometimes it's better. It's like ignorance is bliss, right?
that's
Like,
right.
no, we're going. Just power through it.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, then I went on to AOA school. That too, there was no laps. I showed up. I had about the weekend, classed up on Monday. At the time, I believe AOA school was only like 6 weeks long. The only gap in my training that happened, or in my pipeline, was I was kind of put on hold there for a couple of weeks because there was me and one other dry air crew in my class. So they didn't really know. I guess getting orders for us was kind of odd for them. Not too many crewmen were going through AOA school. So
Hmm.
got my orders and I shipped off San Diego, HC3 pack rats, started my FRS, and
Nice.
along
Well,
my
let's
journey goes.
let's head back to SAR school.
Okay.
So you went through in 99. I was actually getting out of the Navy officially at that point. So
Yeah.
total just missed each other.
Yeah.
Um, what are your memories of SAR school?
Well, the biggest memory I had was wondering if I made the right choice because, like I said, I came in on the airplane and I was the only air crewman in the busload that came down. So they didn't know what to do with me. So somehow they get me in this car and they get me all the way down to aircrew barracks. And it's like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And there was the duty aircrew instructor that was on duty that night. The watch had to go wake him up in the DAI room. And I had to go walked over there. And I remember them waking him up, and to me, this guy just seemed like a giant to me. His name was Metzler. I don't know if you knew of him. He was an AW2 at the time. Big guy. In my mind, he might as well have been 6'8", but I think he's like 6'2". And I just remember him rolling out of bed, scratching his eyes, and just kind of like gruff, which you would be if you're the DAI checking somebody in.
Hmm.
And I just felt like, oh God, I know this guy's a rescue swimmer. Maybe I'm not fit for this or not. So that was the first wake up call. But after I got my feet under me, aircrew school was rather a breeze. I kind of had friends who were going through SAR school, so I had some of the gouge going in beforehand. And yeah, man. So I got to rescue swimmer school, and there is kind of like a switch that happens from aircrew school to SAR school, especially when it was at the old building down the street that's since gone away since Ivan. It was nobody was down there, nobody was watching you, and so it was like when you were in their realm, you were in their world, and mom and daddy ain't gonna help you, and nobody. So like they kind of owned you. It's a little spooky checking in. You don't know anything from anything else, and you show up down
Hmm.
there. The rules were rigid. They expected an awful lot out of you, and you're expected to fall in line. So I think I adapted to that pretty quick. I liked that. I like the rules. I like things that are standardized. I like things that are regimented, and so I think I really fed into that quite a bit. So I enjoyed my time at Rescue Summer School. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I think if you ask a lot of people that made it through, they'll say they liked it, but you like it when you're looking back, when
yeah,
you have that fear of failure and you're going through and you're getting hammered beyond anything that, well, maybe it aligned with, our childhood, like if we come from like childhood trauma, but it's different. They're not necessarily trying to hurt us. They're trying to make sure that we fit within these boundaries and can save lives and aren't going to, tap out when stuff hits the fan and, things get hard. So yeah, I agree. It's a cool experience. Everything's cool when you look back on it.
Yeah.
But it's definitely tough. But there's such a high attrition rate, not many people work well in oxygen deprived situations where someone's trying to drown you. You have to really remain calm in those situations. And there's so many things to learn, and it's a mindset. You either have it or you don't. What do you think was different about you?
I gotta say, like, with my dad taking me on the runs and stuff, I think I started to develop some self-reliance in difficult times. There was, there's something to be said when you have to only depend on yourself on like team sports over. So when I got there, everything you're doing at SAR school, sure, it's a team thing, but they're giving you time swims, they're giving you time runs, they have certain
Mhm.
expectations of you.
Very individual. Yep.
Yeah, and you rely on yourself. So physically, I don't remember being really challenged by anything. I remember thinking it wasn't necessarily easy, but there was nothing that was beyond my capabilities. I think the difficult things that I saw was really the expectations the instructors would put on you was beyond your limits. And not from the uniforms to squaring the corners to how you spoke, everything had to be very rigid. And I saw that really lived out in the operational world, why they hammered that into you.
Mhm.
And so what I found difficult was it wasn't so much the physical stuff, is that we started handling gear and stuff like that. And they added a little bit of outside distractors and intimidation to you. How could you keep your mind straight so that you can stay on those checklists and make sure that you were getting the job done without getting ruffled because somebody's got you going on? So
Mhm.
for me, that's what was the most difficult thing. And I learned while I was there to kind of hone that a little bit more, to stay focused on the task at hand, and don't get caught up in the stuff going all around you. And I see that lives out in the operational where everything lives on a checklist. And so
Mhm.
definitely a crawl, walk around. So that was the hard thing. It was a hard thing to do that. While at SAR school, but you know,
Yeah. No, you nailed it there. And that's a big weed out process right there. Like your attention to detail. If that's why you get hoisted up after a multi and, you have, I don't know, sucking chest wound, you have someone going into cardiac arrest, but then you have the in shock free floater trying to jump out of the door. It's like all these distractions. What do you do? Well, you may not be able to save them all, but those instructors are just watching. And it could be as, not putting your gunner's belt on or something. It could be something as simple as a safety measure where they'll let you finish out everything. Oh, by the way, you failed. You reached up and grabbed the hoist and you're electrocuted now, but still let you go through everything. It'd be a major safety. I don't know, maybe it's changed, but you'd have to really violate something to like stop it and just know you're done type of
yeah.
thing. So you definitely learn a lot. And SEER school and SAR. I don't know. Did you go through SEER as an AO?
Oh yeah, for sure. That was during my time while I was at the FRS. They kind of broke us off. We went and we came back, finished up.
Yeah. So those are schools that encourage failure because you're going to learn from those failures. It's those debriefs. It's where you're humiliated and just embarrassed in general because you see a vulnerability as an instructor and you hone in on it because how are you going to respond? Because guess what? Middle of the ocean, high sea state, panic survivor, multi survivors, whatever, we're not going to be there. There's no
Yeah.
sides of the pool. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. I'm curious because I don't know anything about it other than the AOs handing weapons and smokes and different things, torpedoes. How was AO school? Like what do you go through? Is that like a 8 week school or
I
6?
think it was about 6 weeks. Yeah. So, the job sheet that I read to be this aviation gunsmith, all this kind of stuff that was tied to being a rescue swimmer. When I got to AOA school, they're just trying to make regular AOs. And so we were learning an awful lot about the Mark 80, the Mark 82, the Mark 76 practice bombs, and this bomb shackle and this bomb rack and all these other things that, to be honest, I never saw. Anything I ever saw out in the real world was I got to play with CADs a little bit. I counted some rounds. I checked the ready service locker, kept the 50 cals clean. really had nothing to do with being an AO. So it was like being a fish out of water.
Mm.
I was just absorbing the information. It really was not hard. It was just memorizing some numbers. Relatively easy school. Then we would go out during the sea school, was actually going with like the bomb load teams and loading these bombs up on
Hmm.
these like fake aircraft wings, all that kind of stuff. Um, I'm glad I experienced that. I'm glad that the actual AOs I saw out in the operational world, AOs get kind of a bad name because it's kind of like on the low end, like bosun's mate and whatnot. But
Mm.
I saw what these
I,
guys do out
I don't
there.
remember that. I
Yeah,
don't remember that at all. Like I definitely always appreciated someone handling my weapons.
yeah. We always got. I think maybe because the school was short, and to be honest, it was pretty easy. Nothing against AOs, ever, because the job gets far more detailed as a real AO, and it gets deep and technical. But the A school was rather
Mhm.
easy, and to go through. And I was like the first of all my group of friends because my A school was the shortest. Get that push button third class. So next thing you know, I'm a third class for everybody. So I caught a
Mhm.
hard time for being an AO, but yeah, AO school wasn't that bad. It was interesting to learn something that I would never use. I found I kind of felt cheated compared to some like the ADs and the airframers and the AEs and ATs that I was surrounded around the rescue swimmers. They were actually learning some of their rate, and they got to
Mhm.
really go do that when they got to the squadron. So it was a unique thing. Uh, being an AO is it's an odd thing to be a rescue swimmer. AMEs have the same problem in the HC world. They also don't have ejection seats to work on, so we're kind of
Mhm.
like the misfit children, AMEs and AOs in the HC world.
Yeah, you're not misfit, you're special.
That's exactly right.
So you went to 46s.
Correct.
I don't tell me about that experience. I've never flown in a 46. I've seen them crash, and they're really good at vert rep. I mean, it's a solid machine. I mean, are they still using them?
No, they're decommissioned. I do believe they're being used for like logging, and there's some. I think the Canadians may be still using them. I think the Japanese has a different variant. I'm not caught up on it. You'll still see them used here and there. I think the State Department's also still using them. But as far
Okay.
as military use for the U.S., yeah, they've gone. They've been decommissioned in '04. So,
Okay.
yeah, God's Chariot. That's what we call it. Like I said, going to the 46 reunion, it's a very, very tight community. There was
Hmm.
only HC6, HC8, HC3, and HC5 during my time frame that was flying the 46. It was a very small community towards that end, and a lot of these folks are still alive and keep together because it was very tight. Um, yeah, to be honest, my starting in the H-46, that's when the adversity, the first bit of true adversity that lives outside the aircraft really started to come to me. When I was at the FRS, I have several flights to do that introduce emergency procedures and all that kind of good stuff. I only had my check ride left, and had a friend of mine, he had his check ride. He headed off to Virginia, which is where I was supposed to be going to HC8. And so we went down to Tijuana, because that's what you could do back then if you're under
Hmm.
21, and that's where the party was. So I went down there, and I ended up getting jumped while I was down there. And guy knocked me cold and started kicking me in the head with some steel toe boots. And
Wow.
I had to get scooped up by the Tijuana ambulance. They dropped me off at the border. Somehow I found my way to Balboa. I couldn't see and blacked out. Yeah, I had total complete blowout fracture in my right orbital, fractured the orbital wall, the orbital floor, the upper, I think it's called the maxilla, right? This upper jaw here had a big crack
Oh my
down the
gosh.
middle.
Horrible.
Um, Double vision. I couldn't see for quite a few days. Needless to say, that took me out of flight with one flight left to get my wings to
Hmm.
be done. So, that's where the adversity started for me in this whole career path line is they put me on, I'm trying to think, what is that called now? Not, it's like a med hold. Essentially, I was non-flyable and I needed a med board and all this kind of stuff. So they needed to
Hmm.
hide me somewhere. So they hid me as an AO. They hid me over at base weapons at NAS North Island, which was way off. If you're going out Point Loma, that's where there's a little pier right there at the channel before you actually hit the Pacific. And
Hmm.
that's where ships would come in and unload and offload. And there was the bunkers and all that stuff there. So that way they would hold the weapons. So as you came into San Diego Bay, you would offload. And as you left, they would load the ship up. So they had their armament and whatnot. And I was there for about a year on that med hold status, going back and forth to medical. My career was in limbo. I had no idea what was going to happen if I'd ever fly again. Had a lot of it was definitely a TBI. Went unconscious for a while.
Hmm.
Having a lot of like migraine headaches. Double vision was really bad. Doing a lot of medical things. At one point, they wanted to put like a mesh under my eyeball because the orbital floor wasn't healing right. And I turned down that surgery because I wanted to see if I could heal on my own. I didn't like the idea of surgery.
Oh yeah, and it's Balboa, right? So
And
you
it's
got
Balboa, which
the
I'll
eyeball
go.
mesh for dummies in one hand, and
Yeah. And it was cutting edge at the time. I remember talking to me. I think they said they made it out of like potato skins or something with some, it's not that,
yeah, you're
nutrient,
like,
but
nah,
there's
I'm
some
not
kind of,
buying it.
yeah, I wasn't feeling it. I don't want to cut myself up because you're never the same after you cut. And you're absolutely right. It's Balboa. There's something to be said about military medicine. And that's definitely why I started paying attention. That comes into fruition far, far more later in my career. Um, yeah, so I mean, at a certain point, I was thinking to myself, well, I don't want to just be an AO, as we spoke about before. The AOs, I kind of had an idea what they did. I didn't want to do that. I was almost done flying, and I had a taste for it at this point. So that's what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
I know it's a dirty word. You're never supposed to lie to medical, but I found a way to kind of cheat my way through the vision tests and whatever I needed to do through the ophthalmologist, everything when they were checking me out.
Mhm.
And I just basically kind of said I didn't have double vision. I knew how to kind of get past the test so that I could get my flight status back up. And so that's what I did. I mean, even to this day, in the extreme up and down, I still have double vision in those areas, but I've
Yeah, I
learned
was
to
gonna
manage
ask.
around it. Here I am. I go back to HC3. Only this time my order is to HC8. I've obviously been cut. They need to fill that with somebody else since that was on hold.
Mhm.
And so I received orders to HC11. We get our orders before we start the FRS, so I knew where I was going. Join the Navy to see the world. I'm from Southern California. They give me orders to San Diego. That's how it
Right.
goes. I had to do the FRS all over again since it had been a year, even though I had one flight left.
Mhm.
Not a problem though, because I had all the information. I was able to help some of the guys in class with me. So, I went right through the flight process, no problem. Got my wings at the end of it and checked on board with HC11 in, gosh, I'm trying to think, that was early 2001, late 2000, something like that. So roughly about a year.
Yep. Did you get your wings punched in your chest?
Yes, I did. When it was still like a thing to do. Yeah, definitely. You can't say that now, but yeah, got my wings. That was a prideful thing. I mean, you can't say that now. People go court martial, all this other
Yep.
crazy stuff for that
No,
now.
I won't tell anyone.
Yeah. Yes, I went on HC11, and that was it was an interesting tour. Like I said, I had this envision in my head how I would be working based on that gunsmith card that I got. Well, the
Mhm.
reality was HC11 was a debt concept. So you owned your two aircraft, you went to your debt shack, and that was made up of a bunch of different maintenance folks that were attached to that debt. And that's where you belonged. So in other squadrons that were HC, they were shop concepts. If you're an AD, you worked in the AD shop and so on. So
Mhm.
PRAO. Well, we had an AO shop. They had one short duty AO guy that was running it. And so ipso facto, what's that make, young AO3 Littledale? It makes me the guy that's really good at handing tools to people because I didn't have much of a job. So as a debt
Yeah.
concept, everybody throws their hands in. You're going to do wash jobs, bilge jobs. You're going to help Q and DQ engines, drop engines, do
Nice.
phases, all that kind
You're
of stuff.
learning
So
everything.
yeah, the only difference was I wasn't a CDI or QA and any of that kind of stuff. So I was mostly just kind of like the helper guy. And unfortunately, I mean, that's just how it was. I mean, as an
Mhm.
AO, I was mostly just a crewman, and then I was there to help with maintenance in any way I could.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. Different.
Yeah.
So you had some interesting SAR experiences, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, actual rescues, yes. In HC11 with the 46, I now know after leaving that airframe and being able to see like the 60 Hotel and the Sierra, just being a 46 crewman was in and of itself an event to be a part of that is every bit like being in rescues. It was very common to have an emergency procedure that was real. Um,
Mhm.
as much as once a week or once every couple of weeks, it was not an uncommon thing. So I got used to that type of flying when I was there. Yeah, like
Yep.
losing engines, it wasn't uncommon to take off knowing that you may not be single engine capable, compressor stalls, cabin fires, massive hydraulic, loss. I mean, this
Yeah,
was
that's living.
that was just the life in the 46, and you got used to that.
Yeah, that's wild. So you did jumps and everything from the 46?
Yeah. You could be that. That was a neat thing about the 46 is we had the hoist that you saw up front, had the boom that would come out, and then you had the hoist that would come down. But we also had a winch, an internal winch that you could rig up so you could hoist through that hellhole in the
Hmm.
middle of the aircraft, and we could rig it all the way back up to the ramp so you could get hoisted off the ramp, which was really great. You could hold your fins, you could take a run and launch off the ramp
Yep.
and do your jumps that way.
It's
So
hard to do out of a hotel or Foxtrot. You
yeah,
might get one step and
the only SAR I ever got, 21 years, one rescue, I was an instructor at Rescue Swimmer School. I was here from '04 to '08,
nice.
and they were having a
Was
hard
was
time.
DeCenzo there then?
He came a little bit later as a civilian. Yeah, I do remember him. Good man. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, we served
Um,
together.
yeah, he's definitely a good guy. Unfortunately, no longer with us it is what
Yeah.
it is, how this life is. But yeah, when I was at Rescue Swimmer School, this was I gotta look at the award rather, because I kind of lose. I think it was in 2006. I went up to Cherry Point twice. There was a Marine Corps station SAR unit. There used to be one down in Buford. There used to be one in Cherry Point, and then one in Uwe Cooney. At this point, I believe Cherry Point was the only one available at the time. And so we would get Marines every once in a while to go through Rescue Swimmer School.
Mhm.
And that's what they would do, like a collateral duty during that tour of service. And they could be like an ops guy, whatever. They weren't like us, you know what I mean? Anyway, it wasn't a career thing. And they were low on manning, and they were having a hard time being able to keep the flight schedule going with swimmers up there. And we've recently had a student come through, and so we had good communications with Cherry Point up there. And so they've reached out to us and said, hey, maybe you guys could loan some bodies up here to fly as swimmers while we're trying to get bodies down to SAR school to get qualified. So I had an opportunity to go down in the summer, and I had the opportunity to go down during the Christmas time frame, I think in 2005. That's right. So the summertime I went was 2006. It was great because I wasn't too far out of model. They also flew the H-46 Delta model. The rest of the Marine Corps flies the Echo. So I was still current in model. So to get back in the aircraft, did a quick little check ride, a little stand flight for a SAR, and I was ready to stand duty. So every morning you get up and you go do a range sweep with them, just go fly around, make sure everything's good, and you sit back. And I basically hung out in ops. They had like a PlayStation set up, whatever, and I just had to be there in the squadron all through the day. Most of the time it was rather benign. I went on some training flights with them, and doing some overland SAR, getting their SAR med techs qualified and stuff like that. Some hoisting stuff in the water. It was fun. For the most part, I was just kind of hanging out, waiting for a call. And that's exactly what happened. I was sitting up there in the holdout room, and next thing you know, the alarm goes off. There's a SAR. We hear that there's a Harrier that had punched out over the Pemmico Sound. I think it's June or July this time, so it's North Carolina. It's nice and hot and sticky.
Mhm.
So every bit of intel we've got to this point is it's going to be wet. And so I'm getting dressed out, and I'm heading to the aircraft. I got my SAR bag. Corporal Covell, I think his name was. Once again, I got to look at the award. I only flew with him the times I was there, and this was 20 years ago. So HM1 Ford was my SAR med tech at the time, HM1 Ford, and then myself as a swimmer. And kind of took off. It wasn't a big deal. We had the intel. We knew it was a Harrier, punched out. We had all our gear. And so it seemed like let's go get him. No big deal. Until we rolled up near the area where he punched out, and you could see the smoke rising up from the forest, and realized, he had just missed the Pemmico Sound. He landed in the Pemmico Forest,
Mm.
and you could see the smoke hole with the aircraft all blown apart and everything. And so then we begin the search looking for the parachute. And there we finally find it. It was, a mile or so away, give or take. And so we're looking for where can we land? Where can we land? It's really thick, dense forestry. And there's all these like real tight service roads that are all through there. So we essentially did a cow landing with the 46, as we're coming in, we're whacking branches and whatnot as we come down in the T of these two service roads, these little fire roads in the back of the deep forest. We landed, and so we started making our way through the forest, and we come up on the guy, and he's perfectly fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with him. And so talking a little bit, he's got no injuries like that. So we walked him back to the aircraft and put him up in the litter and flew back. It was really rather benign for waiting all this time as an instructor at SAR school. I got all these skill sets, everything I'm supposed to know and do. And it turned out to be rather benign as it all went together. The guy was fine, no injuries. And to be honest, looking back on it, I don't remember even feeling much hypering like that. It just felt like that alarm went off, and everybody in the crew, the pilot, co-pilot, sergeant med tech, the crew chief, myself, it all just went so seamlessly together
Hmm.
that I keep saying the word benign because that's what it felt like to me. But
Hmm.
reality, looking at it from the outside in, anybody would be pretty amazed by the fact that that just happened so quickly, and the fact that that landing we did and everything. But yeah, I mean, that was my only one SAR experience. I compare that to some of those emergencies and stuff I had in the 46 before flying. They were
Yeah.
far more hair raising than just
Well, and just
rescue I
because
got.
you had those experiences, I mean,
Yeah.
your level of normal was so
Yeah.
elevated compared to anyone else. But also, I mentioned this to a lot of other guests, or they mentioned it to me. But one of the appeals of our job is you never know what you're truly launching for. In your scenario, you thought it was a water rescue Harrier, known for trying to hover and not working out so well, and a lot of ejections back in the early days. Um, but this one, fortunate that the pilot came down uninjured, wasn't hanging in a tree or punching out sideways or anything. At that point, your mindset changes because now it's like you're getting ready to dress out, or you're the hoist operator. I don't know what you were in that scenario. Um, but now it's not over water. Now it's over land. Even then, how far inland was it? Is it the aircraft could crash inland, punch out over water? There's all these different scenarios, but it essentially turns into more of like a medevac at that point. But you don't even know if the pilot is okay, because
Yes.
until you get there, you're hiking up, you see him, he's just chilling. We've all seen that. Someone ejects out of an 18, they're sitting in their raft and they're eating charms and firing flares in the sky and just loving
Yeah.
life, but they're in shock. I'm sure he was in shock as well, but dealing with it well. And the fact that you were able to get there in a timely manner, you never know. And that's part of it. And anyone else listening that's hasn't done our role, it's it's probably crazy to think of just how calm you were, because that's a chaotic situation. But it's all that training, it's experience, it's flying in a coffin, for how many hours, in the 46. I know it's a great aircraft, so
The
I
flying coffin. Yeah.
don't give me any hate for that. It's
No, no, no.
definitely purposeful. It's had its time. But it was known for exactly what you're saying. Every flight in any helicopter is a potential tragic situation. But then when you have some of these legacy aircraft, you just tack on some of the things that you just get used to. This
Yeah.
is normal flying, and people are like, "Are you serious?" Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
When I tell kids now, I call them kids, but younger crewmen, they've all experienced like the Sierra or when I was at 85 in the hotel.
Hmm.
And they say this, that about an aircraft. I tell them about like how my crew chief flight went, my crew chief check ride on the 46. Um, it wasn't as sanitary where it was just an inside the squadron. We're just going to do like a ULT flight. And then, it's just us. We had to get flights in where we could. And it just so happened we had work to do that day. And we were transporting some passengers from ship to shore. And I was out on the USS Sacramento doing, debt workups. And so, hey, it was a good day to go and get my crew chief check ride done. We had about 10 packs on board. I was sitting in the crew chief seat, which was, your back is up against the pilots and the door is right there to your left. The second crewman or your swimmer sits on the left-hand side on the troop seat over there.
Hmm.
And we had a thing in the 46 we did, it was aft station checks. And so your job was every 10 to 15 minutes, your job was to get up because all the componentry was in the aircraft. I had to get up. It may come to the point I might need to drop an engine bay to check the engines in flight. You go in the back, you check the aft transmissions. I know 60 guys like to call them PDIs. We called them Delta Ps in the back in the day, the pressure differential indicators. Check the generators in the back, the forward tranny. There were certain little isms we had to check to make sure everything was good. So I'm sitting in the crew chief seat. Hey, it's time for me to get up, do an aft station check. I said about 10 packs on board. I got up and I start walking back there in my little toolkit and everything. I'm going through my checklist, boom, 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 everything's good. And I hear pow over the engine and everything. I can hear this thing. We had this thing called the brake and power valve which was 3,000 psi, and it sat right above the crew chief, and there was plungers on it so that you could manually operate the boom and the hoist if you had to, if the pistol grip wasn't working.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's like this. I see I'm losing all my old maintenance things. 26 guy's going to.
And you're describing it well.
Yeah, it's basically like a big transfer area for hydraulics. The AM's going to kill me because I'm not saying it right. I mean, come on, guys. It was 20 plus years ago.
Hey, throw some hate. All the listeners.
Yeah, oh, yeah, the 46 guys are like, damn AOs, they don't know nothing. But that thing had busted, and had I been sitting in the crew chief seat, that 3,000 psi, and we always talked about it. It'll take something to cut you in half. It'll cut right through your skin, right? Yeah. And then the whole cabin just started to feel like smoky and everything because this PPS, this hydraulic fluid spraying everywhere. And from the back on the ICS, I start, because I don't have my PCL on me, but we're supposed to know these things. There's certain critical memory items. And then to some degree, you're expected to know things past the CMIs, right? And so I'm helping the pilots while they're flying up front. I'm helping them do the isolate and switch and all this kind of stuff in the back, running through steps. We get that isolated, sit back down. I wipe my crew chief seat down, check on the passengers, and hey, by the way, aft station check's complete, and we move on along. And I just kind of did my thing. And I know normally in crew and check rides, there's usually like this checklist, they blah 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 blah. And for the crew chief, the A and I that was doing mine, he said, "Man, it's pretty hard to throw anything at you. You had an actual emergency procedure."
I know, right?
On board. I think you did all right. And, we didn't have a lot of flight cards and things like that back in the day, like I see is pretty common now. And you grew up with it in HS world. Mm-hmm. You kind of, you did your time, and it was kind of decided whether you were ready to be a crew chief.
Yeah.
I didn't have these like NSW flights and all these other kind of crazy things. One of my very first crew chief flights, I went out and I was doing Jacob's ladder with the teams right away. Suddenly they hand you the keys to the car and say, "Good luck. I hope you figure it out." So that was the environment I grew up in. The H-46 world it was expected that you were going to use head work every time, all the time, and not get flustered over stuff. So, and that was that was really, honestly, kind of an average day in a 46. Things like that would happen.
Yep. Yeah. And I think as a senior crewman, like when you're testing someone, I get it. There's standards. It's important. You got to have all that in place, but it's just like out in the civilian world, like as soon as you interview someone, within the first few minutes, this is a fit or this is not a fit. I'm curious from working with the teams in the Jacob's ladder. I know how it all works from a 60, but from a 46, like that's out the back, right?
Correct. Yep. So you'd usually have crew chief would sit up front. I mean, to be honest, sometimes you get in the aircraft, it's two qualified crew chiefs. You would just kind of, on the schedule, this, on that. But we get a flight like that, we would just kind of like, rock, paper, scissors where we want to be. Yep. Jacob's ladder in the 46 depends on what you like. But if you're the guy out the ramp, your job was to lay down on the ramp. Your best situation awareness was to lay down on the ramp. You're flying forward, that Jacob's ladder is hanging behind you. Mm-hmm. But of course, the aircraft's flying forward, but you're back here on the ramp and you're still talking the pilots on. So the only way to do that is lay on the ramp and hang your body down and over the ramp so that you could see yourself where you were flying forward, so that you could talk the pilots on left, right, forward, wherever the swimmers were. Hopefully they're that nice straight line. Yeah. Start making those calls and assisting the team guys up the ladder as they came.
And how's the ICS during that? Because it's pretty loud. You're hanging out underneath. Is it the Vox? Like, do you have to like crank that up to like 50 or?
No Vox in a 46. That was the thing I learned.
All press to talk.
Yeah, that was the new thing I learned in the 60. I was like, wow, this is fantastic. No, we had long cords. That's right. 50, 60 foot long cords, which became another thing you had to always keep track of while you're flying. There's been people that have died because they got caught up in their long cord in a crash.
Yeah, I know. I mentioned one in my book.
That's right. He was flying with the Marines, right? He was an HM, right? Ironically, his mother-in-law lived across the street from me while I was here as an instructor at Rescue Swimmer School. So I know a little bit about that story. Yeah. So no, you have the long cord. And so you're kind of hanging on the aircraft with one hand. You got the push to talk in the other while you're hanging upside down, making the calls. And of course, now the calls are reversed and upside down, like right and backwards. So whatever my right is actually the pilot's left, and trying to do all that. But through time, you get enough reps. So it is what it is. But that's how we do it. And then the crew chief will be up in the door helping to aid any kind of talk-ons up front if need be. But yeah.
No, that's interesting. So I know you're doing interesting things now. So, I always say the being a rescue swimmer is the ultimate form of serving others. And a lot of us, once we get out, we've maybe unconsciously just get right into that. It's just a part of us. And I don't know, you want to talk about what you're doing nowadays?
Yeah. So when I retired in 2019, I knew I wanted to move back to Pensacola. I owned property here, and I liked the area when I was here. It was a great place to raise a family. I got a young son. So we moved back to my property, and I knew SAR prep was a thing. Through my time when I was doing the NSW recruiting job, I knew about like Buds prep, and I knew EOD
Mhm.
was on. So I knew that SAR was coming up on that. I knew GS jobs were available, so I made myself available to that. An opportunity came up, and so I got hired on as a GS, um, and was here to be. Started working, it was about a month or 2 months. The next, SAR prep, it kicked off, and so we started the program up. Did that for a couple of years as a GS, and then in April of 2024, all the instructor staff was turned over to contracting. And so I became a contractor. So now I am the program manager for the contractors there, running the SAR prep course here in Pensacola, a schoolhouse that they will go to prior to requirement that they go through before they get to SAR school. So
Yeah, that's
every
awesome.
day, still doing it. Yeah.
That's so cool. You're just so like immersed in it.
Yeah.
And that's knowing what you know and having gone through, when you did. I mean, how it's a different, I think, mindset. Just, the recruits are different now just because the world is different. What are you seeing and how are you, I guess, evolving to that?
My biggest thing, yeah, I mean, there's a certain amount of physical stuff. I go deep into that because, like I said, I had the experience of being on that front end, getting these kids these screening tests to come in and all that,
Mhm.
having been at the schoolhouse before and then doing operational stuff. Um, there's a certain piece that I'm not going to badmouth anybody, but I think that recruiting could probably do a better job in the way that they shift their prospecting and marketing plan
Mhm.
down at the micro level, getting, finding those little honey holes where the right type of people are existing. Um, so the attrition rate is quite high right now physically. That's one thing to get over. But once we get past the physical thing, the students we do have that are able to grasp the physical stuff and learn and be like a sponge and take in what we're giving them, and they're growing physically, it's good. I think the hardest thing that they're having a hard time with is the psychological aspect of it,
Mhm.
learning how to piecemeal the things that are being given to you, shrink it down into what you can control. There was a contractor I worked with for a short time when I was a GS that was working with us. Great guy named Dan. He's a prior team guy, and he had a lot of little isms he used to talk about. And he brought something up to the students, and I'll tell them, "Hey man, I'm stealing that from you," and I use it all the time. As I try to remind kids all the time, I want to say kids, students. I try to remind them all the time that look, there's two things you can control in this world, right? It's kind of like the Serenity Prayer. What are two things you can control? You can't control if I'm going to make you swim 2,000 meters or 50,000 meters. You don't know if we're going to run 10 miles a day or whatever, how many push ups, whatever. None of that you could control. But what you can control, and this is the thing that Dan told me, and I love it, is attitude and effort. And I think that's fantastic because you can apply that to anything, right? You're in the middle of push ups. You think you're at total muscle failure. You think things are going wrong. Some instructors yelling you out in your ear. All right, attitude. How am I taking this information in? All right, am I allowing those things to eat into my brain and give me negative thoughts? Or am I
Mhm.
owning the situation because I can control how I feel about something? And I think once you calm that mind down and you get back on the task at hand, maybe that's going to be one repetition at a time. Now we start applying the effort. And I think you can truly apply that to anything when the world gets chaotic and it starts to get kind of crazy. Shrink it down to the
Mhm.
two things you can control: attitude and effort. And so I think that's a really big thing we're trying to lean on with the students now is, you know, everybody wants to make it seem like they see the stuff about the SEALs and all that kind of stuff and all that Hell Week, and they think physical, 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 and they're like, that's the easiest part of it, man. What are you
Mhm.
going to do when the world falls apart and all you can think is negativity?
Yeah.
That's when it kicks in. So that's a big one. We're really trying to work on that.
Yeah, that's great. I love that attitude and effort. And yeah, it transfers to so many things in life because once you change that mindset, And I'm good friends with Mark Devine, former SEAL commander, and he has the whole, mindset, growth mindset, just practice that he does with SEAL Fit, and he's doing really, really great things. I was able to spend some time and lead him and some SEAL guys up Rainier. But it transfers across, these are civilians trying to get into these courses because the mindset is such a powerful tool. If you're in rescue swimmer school, physically, you've already taken the end test. You're there. Physically, you will build every day. There's always, exceptions to the rule. You suck water and you drown and you panic, whatever else. Or you just, find out you're not a great swimmer. Okay, great. You're not meant to do this job. But for the most part, physically, you're going to get there. But that mindset is crucial. And that just transfers outside of this small world of, rescue swimmer training. Once you get out into the fleet, you're able to adapt and to just be such a solid performer. But once you actually get out of the military, or in your civilian, side life that you have while you're in, whether it's modeling to your kids or to other people, I mean, it's huge. It's kind of this ripple effect of just having a stable mind. I like that attitude and effort.
Yep.
That's different than, these people that are, with social media and everything else are so brave behind a keyboard, but they wouldn't last an hour, doing the real job out there. And I don't know. All we can do is our small part. And, it's those things outside of our control. If you don't have that attitude and effort, there's always going to be those things outside your control. So you have to be able to respond to that
Yep.
in some form that's going to be positive. Otherwise, yes, you'll fail at everything.
Yeah, so like I said, I mentioned I watched Corey's episode with you. I thought that was quite amazing things that he talked about.
He's a cool dude.
Like I said, I knew him loosely, interacted with him a few times, didn't know that depth. And I think that many of the people you're going to interview and, reading through your book, all those different stories and everything, I mean, those really are the really, sure, I was a rescue swimmer for 21 years. I don't have a lot of those cool stories. My most igniting things are from the 46 and then the one rescue scenario I had. I think a lot of mine came from a lot of the other adversities I had that were kind of intangible that came in, where the same skill sets that I learned early in my career, I adapted them, but they were outside the aircraft, but they were still life-challenging things. I mean, I think the most physically demanding that would kind of line up with that is like when I went through Coast Guard's Advanced Rescue Swimmer School, but a lot of folks go through that schoolhouse, tough schoolhouse. That's about the most coolest thing operationally I got to do. But it's all these other intangible things that I had to get through in order to be where I'm at now. But they don't sound as cool because they're not JP learning and DVL.
They don't sound that cool to you, but to other people, I mean, you're saving lives on a daily basis. I hear that all the time. I'm the same. I was in for 6 years, 2 deployments, had my share of experiences while I was in, but it was after I got into high altitude mountaineering, helping people when I'm on Everest or down in Antarctica or wherever, it's someone across the street, trips and falls. Am I going to sit there and laugh, or am I going to run over there and make sure that they're okay? It's a different mindset. It's about running towards the problem, not ignoring it. And being a rescue swimmer is not just about in the aircraft, because it shaped you. It's who you are. You continue to give back. So I think everything you're doing is amazing. All right. You want to switch to a hypothetical scenario?
Sure.
Okay. I'll give you a choice. Okay.
Okay.
Between the three, do you want to work in hostile territory, Arctic waters, or in a hurricane?
Wow. Oh man. Oh, well, I don't like the cold, so let's stay out of the Arctic. Try to not.
Okay, so
maybe that's what I'll get now.
Yeah, that's what you're doing. Downed aircraft in Arctic waters.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. A military aircraft crashes into icy waters near the Arctic Circle. Survivors are trapped inside the partially submerged fuselage, and rescue operations are complicated by freezing temperatures and ice flows. You're launched, you're heading out there. That's all you know. What's going through your mind?
Obviously, I'm assuming now by we've done the brief, we know water temps, we know where they are, so that's the number one thing. I got to think. Honestly, the first thing I'm thinking about is obviously the cold and survivability in it. Obviously, I've done all the necessary pre-flight on my dry suit. I'm going to make sure that's obviously good. So we're assuming that's all good together, but that's going to be deeply on my mind because while I was at Advanced SAR, that is something happened to my dry suit. It leaked, and
Yeah,
that
it's no good.
definitely changed my mindset when my dry suit leaked in that cold water.
Especially up in Astoria.
Yeah, it's very cold there. Yeah, so those are gonna be my number one things on my mind. I'm also thinking about the DI systems on the aircraft, how the aircraft's going to be stabilizing through that. I mean, mechanically, that thing is what is going to keep us alive.
Mhm.
We know the number of survivors at this point. You said,
I don't know if it said it on there or not.
okay, so we'll,
We never know, right? They
yeah,
say there's two people, you get out there and there's five. They say there's five, you get out there's two.
yeah. So I mean, once again, that's another thing I'm thinking about along with the equipment. Do we have the right thing? I'm probably going to be thinking about wanting to bring an extra litter just in case. Just all those kind of backup things. Get on station and then assess the situation, see what's happening. Because at that point, what am I seeing when I get on top? That makes I certainly don't want to be doing a 10 and 10 into Arctic water or a 15 and 0. So I want to be looking at getting direct deployed or hoisted down if any possibilities there. I'm wondering about they're on this they're on a ship. You said they're in a fuselage of some sort, or they're in an aircraft.
Dude, I already put it away. Right. Pay attention.
Yeah. See, I wasn't listening during the pre.
Military aircraft crashes. Didn't say what type, just that survivors, so it's plural, trapped inside the fuselage.
Yep. How am I going to break into that fuselage? Is there still electronics on there? Are there fires necessary?
Bring the jaws of life with you.
Yeah, and that's something we talk about, like ASTs. Those guys do bring that type of equipment with it that we don't necessarily have. So all those things have run through my mind. So as soon as I get down to that aircraft, how am I going to get into it? Number one, once I'm into it, how am I going to assess these guys and triage them? Very serious. They're going to have some sort of medical problems going on right there. How am I going to stabilize them? How am I going to move them? Am I possibly going to need another rescue swimmer in there? Sometimes you get in these operations where you need 2 or 3 rescue swimmers to get in there. One guy's not going to be able to do it. So that's another thing prior to launch. We got enough bodies to go down there. Do we have the proper amount of gear? Past that point, we get in the aircraft and it's going to be play by play. Just like you said, sometimes they say there's 2, and then you come down there and find out there's 5 people down there. So it's as I'm peeling back the layers of the onion, I'm making decisions, at that point and, package them up as best as possible. And I'm thinking about the cold. They're not going to have great survivability. So that triage early on with that initial and secondary assessment, it's going to be load and go as quick as possible so we can get back from our launch point so we can get them onto a proper EMS. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was thorough. I haven't had a 1-minute scenario go a minute yet. Just the mindset of the rescue swimmer. There's so many things because it's all these unknowns, right? So you're going out there, you're trying to map everything in your mind so that you're not just going in blind. But once you get there, everything just, gets reassessed, remapped. But at least you have like this, this sort of guide going into it that you just have to, shift left or right instead of just, when you go in blind, and that can cause panic in itself.
I think it's kind of like, you remember those books probably when you were younger too. I read them. There's no way my dad got me to read was those choose your own adventure books. You read 10 pages and then you make a decision. And that's kind of what it is you have this idea that it's a dragon slaying book, but the reality is every 10 pages or so, much like in a rescue, I'm going to have to make some new decision that maybe had nothing to do with the training I had. Maybe it's going to tell me to divert from the actual training thing in order to make the best possible decision with head work moving forward. So that's what it kind of feels like to me. It's unless it's a really, really packaged scenario and you get real deep into the micro details of things, it really is kind of like, let's peel each layer back and see what we're going to do next, and then dig back into your bag of tools and see what you're going to do.
Yeah. Nice. I'd say you passed. So no, thank you. I was curious, as far as your eye, like how has your eye, your TBI, like everything, how have you recovered?
I mean, that's like my minor injury for the most part compared to my bigger injury. Yeah. I mean, I still get migraines from time to time. I assume that's where they came from. If if I was to take something like right here, if I'm running my finger off my orbital bone from here to here, I can't open my left eye. But if I do it here, I can clearly open my right eye. It's sunk back in my head.
Mm-hmm.
There's double vision, like I said, to the up and the lower. But we're
Mm-hmm.
talking, 20 plus years. I've learned how to cope and work
Sure.
around that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually not that bad for me. That injury, I've learned to live with the little bit of things it's given me for the most part. My other injuries are the ones that primarily are the one that still antagonize me both, psychologically and physically as the years go by.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about those?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that was kind of the part when I saw you said something about the podcast, and you talking about the. So I said my career rather kind of benign as a rescue swimmer is really my story. It really does kind of swim around my real injury that for me was really changed the course of my career. When I was here as a rescue swimmer instructor in 2007, June of 2007. I used to do a lot of necessarily a lot of triathlon races, but definitely a lot of triathlon training. Once again, like running, I
Mm-hmm.
enjoyed that single source. You depend on yourself. You're out on your own. I enjoy swimming. I enjoy biking. I enjoy running, obviously. So I live right near Perdido, and that would be the road I would take, Perdido Highway, which is for those that know the Pensacola area. It's just a 2-lane road, 45 mile an hour, 50 mile an hour speed limit, and it goes all the way out into Alabama. And so that's where I would pack a lot of miles in. And so I was out for a bike ride on that particular day, hot day. I remember I was wearing just a pair of tri shorts. It was the one day I ever thought about not wearing my helmet. Thankfully, I was like, I'm gonna go wear my helmet safe. And I was out on a normal training ride, and I'm heading east, rather I'm heading westbound, and a Lincoln Continental is white, even though it's white and it's Lincoln Continental. It's not marshmallowy soft. I found out was coming eastbound, and it was trying to make a left-hand turn into a business. And so it didn't recognize me as a vehicle. So it's waiting for cars to go by that are going westbound. As soon as it saw an opportunity, it was still rolling. He gunned it to get across and hit me with the right front quarter panel of his vehicle,
Mm-hmm.
and that sent me hitting his windshield and then deflecting straight up in the air and hitting the ground. Didn't see that coming. Didn't have any way to stop the vehicle. I mean, I saw it was about to happen. If you know a triathlon bike, if you're out on the aero bars, if your
Mm-hmm.
brakes are back here and you're going fast, I was doing 25, 27 miles an hour. I couldn't
Wow.
get to my brakes fast enough. There was really nowhere for me to go. So I just decided to brace into it and I'll just ride this thing out. And I didn't think it would be that bad, but yeah, man, we hit real damn hard. And like I said, ricocheted up off the windshield, hit the ground, broke my neck. I didn't know it at the time. My hand was also broken, my right hand. But the most serious injury I had was my left tib fib was separated at the knee. So basically, my tib fib was up here as I was laying on my back, and my
Oh my
foot
gosh.
was right next to my face. And I looked down, and I could see about 6 inches of my femur was basically degloved from my leg. I was looking at my bone.
Wow.
So we talk about different training isms and being a rescue swimmer and reps and all that kind of stuff. I was an EMT at the time for work. I sent through EMT school, so that was all very fresh in my head. And I remember people rushing on me on the scene. They want to help, they want to do something. Here I am
Mm-hmm.
bleeding all over the place. They start trying to move me and stuff. So I ended up having to triage my own scene. I got some guys, some construction worker guys came over, and I talked them through putting traction on my leg to put it back in the right position so it wouldn't hurt so bad. And had one person count my respirations and like one person counting my, doing my pulse. And so I had them writing this down. And it just so happens that the position where Perdido Highway is, because it's a 2-lane road, it's hard to get in and out with EMS. So they ended up having to fly life flight in
Oh,
to
wow.
come get me.
Wait, you didn't just ride your bike to the top?
Yeah, one-legged and just go.
Put me in traction. I got this.
Yeah. So, the whole time I'm thinking this isn't going to be that bad. Like I'm injured. I see like, I've had broken bones before. This will all be fine. I didn't really understand how serious my injuries were. Never went unconscious, which is a great thing too. But so life flight came along and I ended up giving them the pass down on my vitals up to that point every 5 minute, the whatever. And then, I must have been in shock. I'm guessing I didn't really feel a lot of pain at the time, but I remember being in the helicopter and they're trying to do their job. And I remember messing with the flight nurse and they're asking them like, what's the shaft horsepower on this thing? And
Hmm.
I think that's what we do kind of in a moment like that.
Sure.
Um, yeah, then I life flighted me to the hospital. I was there for 5 days. Most of it I don't remember because they had me so drugged up. But yeah, I fractured my C6. Um, and fractured my hand pretty bad, but it was my left leg that was the worst. I had a lot of like neurological damage there. I couldn't walk. They didn't really know what was going on. So during the surgery, all they really did was just put my leg back together. They irrigated it out and then kind of just put me back together like a Lego. And they said, we needed to heal up and we'll go back in and look at, what the damage truly was.
Wow.
Um, but, that has a huge impact on your career because much like I'd already experienced earlier in my career, I can't go back on this med hold status again. I can't let that happen.
Yeah.
So I'm very concerned. Well, they put me back in that med hold status again. And I'm concerned now because we just recently converted to AW. They force converted us all over. So it was like an AO that I still had a job in the Navy. If I can't fly and I'm an AW, at that point I was starting to get too senior to transfer into something and too junior to retire. Like I'm starting to sweat, a little bit. What am I going to do? And I was kind of at the top of my game, I think, at that point. I was definitely doing well in the career. So they ended up doing a surgery almost a year later called a microfracture repair. They go in and they make small breaks in the bone. And that should, in time, that's in the knee joint, would create a little bit of like scar tissue that should act kind of like the cushion in there, meniscus. But when they went in there, even though they had irrigated it, they found kinds of like metal and debris and stuff that was still inside my joint.
Oh gosh.
And I just never was really able to walk right. I had a lot of atrophy in that leg that just wouldn't respond because of whatever nerve damage was done. I couldn't get some muscle in my quad to respond. And I was faced with a decision: what the hell am I going to end up doing now? And I found a way into recruiting. My wife was a news reporter for the Pensacola News Journal here, and she happened to be doing a story somewhere, and she came across a recruiter in the local area who was telling her, he's the chief of the office, was telling her, I got a guy in here who's missing a foot. He came to recruiting because he had some medical stuff going on. He ended up having to have his foot amputated, but he can stay in the Navy. He can be a recruiter. And I was like, okay, maybe that's a way that I can continue to still serve and do something if all else fails, and then I get to continue being on doing something for young kids as they're coming in, kind of helping them, get in the military. So, okay, this will be a good thing. But the adversity continues on. The idea was I would join recruiting and it would be here in Pensacola. That was the whole deal. But I didn't understand how recruiting worked. You belong to the recruiting district. So with about 3 weeks left in recruiting school, they said, oh, hey, by the way, you're not going to stay here in Pensacola. You're going to go to Louisiana. So I had like 3 weeks head notice. I had to somehow move out of my house, put it up for rent or try to sell it, move to Louisiana, uproot my family. But that's where I ended up. I ended up out there in recruiting. And while I was going through recruiting, I was just solid in physical therapy, getting Synvisc injections, cortisone injections, trying different things. In this whole time, trying to stay in the Navy. That's what the whole thing was. More importantly, I get back in the aircraft. I tried lots of different things. I think I told you about before we spoke earlier was, hey, if my leg is going to work and the Navy's not willing to help me out. Initially, when I got hurt, I got treated by some Andrews Institute doctors because it was at Baptist Hospital out in the real world. So my follow-ups were with them. And when they saw my knee after I was done with the spine guy says, hey, man, I'm gonna forward your case over to Dr. Andrews of the Andrews Institute. He's our knee guy. And they walked me around their facility and all that stuff. And I was like, all right, these guys work on like professional athletes like Drew Brees and all that, like big time. And then right before I was about to have a consultation with him and get switched over to physical therapy with them, the Navy said, no, you're within 50 miles of a military treatment facility, so you got to go with us. And the care went, bottom basement care. Their goal was just to get me walking again, where Andrews Institute wanted me to be back at late status again. So then I was kind of caught in that system, and I was really fighting the Navy. Went through Navy Safe Harbor, went through Wounded Warrior Project, petitioned my flight surgeon, NavMed, everybody. I got to get better service, and if I can't get better service, I would like to have my leg amputated and fitted with a prosthetic. And I eventually got to that point. And they thought I was crazy, and they denied me all around. I got to that point because of the cover of All Hands magazine, November of 2008, was a lieutenant EOD officer who'd had his leg blown off, and that, I mean, caught my attention right away. So I was reading the whole article and everything, and he was going through the War College at the time. I was healing up, and he went back to an EOD unit, right back to operational again. And so I thought to myself, maybe they'll let me cut my leg off if Navigator approves me to have a prosthetic. Just like Men of Honor, I'll be able to show them I can put a fin on it, and I'll keep going, because the problem was I couldn't operate my leg from the knee below, but everything above that I was good. So let's do this. Ironically, you can do a lot of you can have all kinds of elective surgeries now in the military, but they wouldn't let me cut off my leg in order to stay in service. So
That's messed up.
and
You want to cut your leg off, you should be able to cut your leg off.
yeah, I mean, it's not functional. I'm trying to get in. I'm trying to continue doing what I'm doing, and they just wouldn't. I lucked out. 5 years of physical therapy. I had a really great physical therapist out in Louisiana. He was out in town, so that I was too far from military treatment facility. So he knew of some at the time cutting edge kind of therapies to do. And ironically, the closest one to get it done with was I was living in Louisiana, but it was going to be at the Andrews Institute all the way back here in Pensacola, called platelet-rich plasma therapy. Mm-hmm. That's where they pull the blood from your body, they spin it, they get that platelets, and then they, under ultrasound, inject it into the injured port of your body. And it was a series of 3 injections I had to do over like a 9-month period. And
I probably had to pay out of pocket, right?
No, ironically, with all my petitioning, I was able to get the Navy.
Oh, that's good.
I did get the first one done, and then they tried to tell me I couldn't get more done until I got my doctor involved. And he was like, "Look, it's a series. You can't just do
you don't just stop now. It's going to grow like a third leg."
Yeah, so I was able to finish those injections, which was really awesome. And I got to say, that got me to the point, much like I talked about before, I know how to kind of cheat my way through the eye test to make sure. I found a way too to just kind of like swallow my pride, not say anything, be like, "Oh yeah, my leg feels good," even though I was in pain all the time. Mm-hmm. But that got me back in the aircraft at least. But I talk about the operational world and how things changed so much. It was like that was 9 years out of the aircraft, and that was during the time the 46 went away. Hotel Foxtrot was on its way out the door. The Sierra and the Romeo were the new thing. Yep. During that period of time, that's why I feel kind of bad. I missed so many of those really great things everybody got to do. Hurricane Katrina, that happened while I was here as an instructor here, so I couldn't participate. The tsunamis and all that in Indonesia and Thailand, that happened while I was also stuck on recruiting. I couldn't be a part of that. There was all these natural disasters and all good stuff. And by the time I got orders, my intent was to go to HSC 85, which took over the HCS mission. Was look, I'm probably not going to make chief, not going to grow anymore, but how can I continue to serve at a higher level? By the time I got there, the war in Iraq was already over. And then there was another thing going on, the Naval Air Ambulance that was happening. All my buddies, they stayed in. So all of the getting was good but gone by the time I showed back up, which was rather an unfortunate thing. But I spent time flying in the hotels. I got back in the aircraft. I switched over to HSC 21, started flying in the Sierra, which was good. I enjoyed that. And then I found myself teaching for the Joint Personnel Recovery Agency, teaching an advanced SEER course. And by the time I was getting to the end of that course, I was trying to think of I didn't get to do all the cool stuff everybody else got to do. Like Corey talked about his aircraft rolling over and the rice paddies and all kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's real cool.
That's not a great thing, but he was doing those Hatter operations and all this happened. That's what you're supposed to do. And I never got to do that. I took stock on the fact that I tried to stay in the Navy at all costs, to the point of even trying to get my leg amputated because I needed to get back. I wanted to be there so bad, but I was so worried because I want to go do these operations. Once I saw the end of it, I started looking. I'm like, look, man, I spent time at SAR school as an instructor. I spent time in recruiting, doing the special warfare recruiting and scooping up guys to do the job. And now here I am again teaching another program to a joint service group. And so I started realizing, well, I don't have any of those great things. Sometimes I talk about those that can't teach or coach. I realized that's kind of what I missed out on. But through some of those adversities that I had with my injuries and fighting to stay in the Navy, and then seeing the person behind the eyes that wants to be the rescue swimmer, that wants to be in this world, whatever, I kind of found myself lucky to be in the job I am now. I mean, that's exactly what I'm doing. These kids are boot camp aircrew school, and then we get them, and now we start implanting some of that stuff in there. So I think that's the one thing I have that's unique, that, man, I wish I had some of those cool stories like the rest of those guys do, but my story is different in a different way of adversity. So
Yeah.
attitude and effort.
So I totally get it. My pastor at church was asking once about, I don't know, we were talking about like if you train in the military, but you never deploy, he, he didn't understand like what I said. It's like going to, seminary and you never get to preach.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay. It's a weird mindset because it's going to war. It's doing the things that you mentioned are
Yeah.
tragic, but you're equipped for it. But your story is so unique and you're owning it now as you're walking through it. It's frustrating as heck, I can imagine, and painful and everything you went through to endure to get where you're at. But you see like all the different people you've touched along the way. I mean, that's got to be super fulfilling, when you finally take a step back and realize, okay, I'm not in control, but whoever is, this is legit. And you're the right person doing the right thing, and you continue to do that. So I think it's amazing. I'm outside looking in, and I think your story is amazing, and you're doing great things.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's something that's really great about that. I get to every once in a while, like just recently, I reached out to SARM, and one of the junior guys that had HSC 21 was E4 at the time. I'm trying to get a hold of somebody in the SARM office, and he happens to pick up the phone. He says, and if he sees us, hey, Chief Weaver, and I thought, oh my God, Chuck Weaver. I mean, he was an E4 when I left, and now he's a chief. And I've heard a little bit along the way the guy's doing fantastic in his career, and he's reached a rank that I never achieved. And I get to hear all these great things. I get goosebumps when I get those kind of things when I see guys I interacted with before that are so successful. I'm hoping the same thing is going to happen with these young kids we got now in class. 5-10 years from now, they're going to be the guy that's on the cover of the All Hands magazine, or they're going to be the one in the video of some natural disaster getting hoisted down and doing their job. That is kind of cool. So those that can't teach. Maybe that's just kind of where I ended up with those experiences. It is really awesome to see guys that do really well as a result.
Yeah, and they will. The people you're impacting today, you're impacting me. I do weird things in my world, but it's these stories, these conversations, they go a long way. So you should be very proud. You should own it, and just keep doing what you're doing. I mean, you definitely have a unique story, from normal rescue swimmers, and that's great. That's what we want to. That's why I want people like yourself on here, share these stories, because you can have an impact on others way outside of your little sphere of influence, way outside of mine. It just kind of trickles out. But based on all these experiences that people will never do, can't understand, they don't get you. What type of wisdom throughout all of that what do you think you've gleaned from all these years of just physical hardship, mental, your military experience, everything? What's a bit of wisdom that you would want to share with the listeners?
I think if you're passionate about something and you really want it, then you have to stay dedicated to it. It would have been very easy for me to just get out of the Navy. They were going to offer me like a med package and I would have had a paycheck every month, but I wouldn't have been satisfied with that. I think that can be applied to anything in life. More often than not, something in life is getting hard and it feels like it's going to last forever and it's never going to be over. You're never going to see the other end of it. But if you stay true to it and you control the things that you can control, the attitude and effort, you see your way through that and you stay fixated on it, you will come out the other side where you were successful, but you have to stay committed to it and you have to stay true to it and have some passion for what you're doing.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and I think a lot of the new recruits coming through, if they watch this and they listen to that, that's huge wisdom. That gets you through every evolution. If you just take that bit of wisdom one step at a time, eventually you get up that mountain.
Yep.
So, Dustin, thank you so much for being a guest. It's been a pleasure to have you on. And
I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to seeing you at the reunion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, and for everyone else, thanks for joining, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Calm in the Chaos podcast. Please subscribe to be notified of future episodes, and if you enjoyed what you just heard, please leave a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen to podcasts. Until next time, get out there and make a difference so others may live.